The cool metal of the handcuffs burned against your wrist as you sat in the dimly lit room. Your heart was pounding like a war drum in your chest. The air smelled of expensive cologne and cigarette smoke, mixing with the distant scent of rain from the open window. You tried to steady your breath, but nothing could calm the storm raging inside you. Across from you, John Jungkook leaned against the desk, his dark eyes locked onto yours. He looked indifferent, calm, controlled, and dangerous. "You'll marry me," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. It wasn't a proposal, it was a sentence. You clenched your jaw, refusing to look away. "You're out of your mind." Jungkook tilted his head slightly. There was a hint of amusement flickering in his gaze. "Maybe, but that doesn't change anything." He pushed off the desk, closing the distance between you in slow, measured steps. "You saw something you shouldn't have. My uncle wanted you dead. I gave you a better option." "A better option?" You spat, yanking at the cuffs. "Forcing me into marriage with a monster?" His jaw twitched at the insult, but he didn't react. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key. Without a word, he unlocked the cuffs and tossed them onto the table. "You're free to walk out the door," he said, motioning towards the exit. You froze, his lips curled into something almost resembling a smirk. "But once you step out, I can't promise you'll survive. My uncle doesn't like loose ends." Your blood ran cold. You weren't stupid. You knew this was a game, a cruel trick to make you submit. But the truth was, you had no choice. Leaving meant death. Staying meant captivity. Gritting your teeth, you turned away from the door. "I hate you," you whispered. Jungkook's smirk disappeared. For a split second, something flashed in his eyes. Something dark, something unreadable. Then just like that, it was gone. "Good," he murmured. "Hate is better than fear." And just like that, your fate was sealed. The ceremony was rushed, emotionless. No family, no friends, just a cold exchange of vows under the watchful eyes of Jungkook's men. You felt like you were signing away your soul. The weight of the ring on your finger felt like shackles, chaining you to a fate you never chose. Jungkook had barely looked at you during the ceremony, his expression carved from stone, his presence suffocating. His men stood around like shadows, their gazes sharp and assessing, as if daring you to object. But what choice did you have? To refuse meant death. To agree meant living in a prison with him. And so you swallowed your pride, forced your trembling fingers to stay steady, and uttered the words that sealed your fate. "I do." Jungkook's voice had been just as quiet, just as final. No love, no devotion, just possession. The wedding happened without your consent. You weren't asked, you weren't given a choice. One moment you were a doctor, living your life, healing people. The next you were trapped in a world of blood and violence, forced to marry a man who knew nothing of kindness. His name alone carried weight, feared, respected, dangerous, and now he's your husband. Now, as you stood in the middle of his house, your new cage, the reality of it all crashed down on you like a tidal wave. Jungkook walked ahead, pulling off his suit jacket with practiced ease. He tossed it onto a nearby chair before turning to you. "Your room is at the end of the hall," he said flatly. You folded your arms, your pulse still racing from the events of the night. "Not our room?" You mocked as your voice was sharp with defiance. Jungkook stilled. The air between you crackled with something heavy, something dangerous. Slowly he turned to face you fully, his dark eyes locking onto yours. "Do you want it to be?" The question sent a shiver down your spine, not because of the words themselves, but because of the way he said them. Low, deliberate, taunting, a test. Your breath hitched, but you refused to let him see your hesitation. You tilted your chin up, matching his gaze with your own. "I would rather sleep on the streets." You snapped. Jungkook's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smirk, but wasn't far from it either. He took a step closer, closing the distance between you with a slow, predatory grace. "Don't play games. You wouldn't win." Your heart pounded against your ribs, but you held your ground. "Neither would you," you whispered, your voice laced with defiance. For a moment, neither of you moved. The tension between you was electric, suffocating. His eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. Gone before you could grasp it. Then unexpectedly he chuckled, a low, humorless sound. We'll see. And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving you alone with your thoughts, your rage, and the slow, creeping realization that you had just married the devil himself. The next morning, you sit at the grand dining table, picking at your untouched breakfast. Jungkook watched you from across the table, sipping his coffee in silence. He noticed everything, the way you pushed your plate away, the defiant glint in your eyes. Eat, he ordered simply. You leaned back, crossing your arms. I'm not hungry. His gaze darkened, but his voice remained eerily calm. I won't repeat myself. You met his stare with equal intensity. And I won't obey. There was a beat of silence, a storm brew in his eyes. Then, suddenly he shoved the table, sending the plates clattering. Your breath hissed as he rose, moving towards you with slow, deliberate steps. He gripped the arms of your chair, caging you in. You felt his breath against your skin. His presence was suffocating. You think this is a game? He murmured in a deadly voice. You swallowed hard but refused to look away. You can't control me. Jungkook exhaled sharply through his nose as if reining himself in. Then without warning, he grabbed a fork, spared a piece of food and held it up to your lips. Eat, he said again, softer this time but laced with warning. Your heart pounded. You knew this is a battle of wills. If you eat, he wins. If you don't, you push him further. Slowly, you smacked the fork away. The metal clattered to the ground. Jungkook stared at you, his jaw tightened. For a second you thought he might explode, but instead he laughed, a dark, humorless sound. Fine, suit yourself. You frowned. This wasn't the reaction you expected. Then as he turned to leave, he added over his shoulder, but don't expect me to be gentle when you collapse from hunger. And then he was gone. You won this round, but at what cost? Days turned into weeks and you found yourself trapped in an unspoken war with Jungkook. You defied him at every turn, refusing to eat, ignoring his commands, attempting to escape whenever you got the chance. The first time you tried to escape, you didn't even make it past the garden. Jungkook caught you with terrifying ease, dragging you back inside without breaking a sweat. The second time, you got further, managing to sneak out to the street before his car screeched to a stop. You barely took a step before strong arms wrapped around your waist, lifting you off the ground. Let me go, you screamed, kicking against him. You monster, let me go. Jungkook didn't say a word, he simply threw you over his shoulder, like you weighed nothing. Put me down, you demanded, pounding your fist against his back. Nothing, not even a flinch. When he finally sets you down inside, he slammed the door shut and turned to you with a calm that was far more terrifying than rage. Are you done? You glared, breathing hard. I will never stop trying to leave. He sighed, rolling up his sleeves. Then I suppose we'll keep doing this until you learn. Your stomach twisted. Learn what? He stepped closer, his gaze cold and unyielding. That you belong to me now. The words sent a shiver down your spine, but you refused to surrender even if it kills you. Days blurred into weeks. Each morning you woke up in the same room, surrounded by luxury that felt like a cage. Each night you went to bed, exhausted from another battle of defiance against Jungkook. But nothing changed. You tried everything, silent treatment, refusing to eat, escape attempts, but he never let you go. Jungkook wasn't just a captor, he was a force, an immovable wall, a man who gave you no choices except to survive under his rules. Until one night you broke. The night was cold and your body trembled, but not from the weather, from defeat. You sat on the floor of your room, knees pulled to your chest, staring at the locked door. Your breaths came out in shallow gasps, tears burning behind your eyes. You couldn't do this anymore, not when every second felt like suffocation, not when the walls felt like they were caving in. Jungkook found you like that when he entered. His usual unreadable expression flickered, with something concern, annoyance. You couldn't tell. He knelt in front of you, voice softer than you expected. You didn't eat again. You didn't respond. Jungkook sighed, running a hand through his hair. You are being stubborn. That was it. Something inside you snapped. Your hands grabbed his shirt, your voice shaking as you finally broke down. Please, you whispered, barely holding yourself together. Just let me go. Jungkook froze, his breath hitched, and for the first time, his eyes revealed something you had never seen before. Hesitation. Your grip tightened, desperation leaking through your words. I can't do this anymore. Your voice cracked. I can't live like this. You win, okay? You win. Just let me go. A muscle in Jungkook's jaw twitched. His hand slowly pried yours off his shirt, but he didn't let go. Instead, he cupped your wrists. His touch was firm but not forceful. His voice was quiet. I can't. Tears spilled over your cheeks. Why? Jungkook exhaled sharply, looking away. His hands dropped to his sides. If my uncle finds out I didn't end you and instead married you, it will cost your life. If I let you go, you won't survive. Your breath hitched. Jungkook looked back at you, his eyes burning with something raw. I married you to save you, not to punish you. Your chest tightened. Then why did it feel like a punishment? What do you want from me? You whispered. Jungkook's gaze darkened. This was the moment he could ask for anything, submission. But instead, I can't give you what you want. I can't give you freedom. Your heart dropped. But anything else you ask, and it's yours. You stared at him. Jungkook's expression didn't waver. You can start a life here. You won't feel the absence of anything. You can do what you want, go where you want, as long as you accept that you'll never leave. A lump formed in your throat. This wasn't living, this was surrender, but you had no other choice. Tears slipped down your face as the realization hit you. You were never getting out. Jungkook watched, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Then slowly he wiped your tears away. You flinched at the touch. But he didn't pull back. His thumb brushed against your cheek, almost gentle. I'm not your enemy. Let me just protect you. Your heart ached. Jungkook didn't say anything else. He just stood up and left. The lock clicked behind him, and you sat there broken. The house was silent, too silent. A suffocating tension hung in the air, thick like the calm before a storm. Jungkook was standing in the center of the room, his broad shoulders squared, his face a mask of deadly calm. Across from him, his uncle, the man who had shaped him, controlled him, the man who wanted you dead. You stood behind Jungkook, barely breathing. Your fingers clenched into fists. You had seen Jungkook ruthless before. You had seen him cold, but never like this. This wasn't just a mafia boss standing in front of his uncle. This was a man ready to burn everything for you. You betrayed me. His uncle's voice was calm, but you could hear the simmering rage beneath it. Jungkook didn't flinch. I made a decision. His voice was flat, unapologetic. You disobeyed my orders. His uncle growled, stepping closer. That woman was supposed to die. His sharp gaze flickered to you, his eyes filled with nothing but contempt. She's the doctor who saved our enemy. You knew this, and instead of killing her, he let out a bitter laugh. You married her? Your stomach twisted. You had known this moment would come, that Jungkook's uncle would never accept what he had done, that he would see it as a betrayal, but nothing could have prepared you for the suffocating weight of it. Jungkook's body tensed, his fingers curled into fists. I did what was necessary. His uncle's gaze darkened. What was necessary? He took a slow step forward, his face twisted in disgust. She was a loose end, a liability, a doctor who saved a man that should be rotting in the ground. I gave you one order, Jungkook, and you failed me. I didn't fail you. I made a choice. His uncle's face twisted in fury. A choice that will cost you everything. Jungkook laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Everything? He tilted his head, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. You think I give a damn about your rules, about the life you forced on me? His uncle's jaw clenched. You owe me. I made you. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me by throwing it all away for a woman? You flinched as his uncle's glare fell on you again. For a moment, you thought he would kill you right then and there, but Jungkook stepped in front of you, shielding you, claiming you, and when he spoke next, his voice was ice cold. She's my wife. Your breath caught his uncle's tilt. A long, tense silence stretched between them, a war waked in the space of a few heartbeats. Then his uncle exhaled slowly, his expression morphing into something dark, calculating. I see. His voice was dangerous now. You think you can protect her? He smirked. You think you can protect yourself from the consequences of this betrayal? Your heart pounded. Jungkook didn't move, didn't even blink. Try me. His uncle's expression darkened and then all hell broke loose. A fight for survival. The next moment happened too fast. His uncle lunged, aiming a gun at you, and before you could even react, the gun was already raised. The bullet meant for you. The gunshot was deafening. For a second, everything blurred. You felt your entire body freeze, but then Jungkook stumbled. His body jerked back, and his hand immediately clutched his side. Gasp left your lips. The color drained from your face as you saw the blood. A scream tore from your throat. Jungkook. His body wavered, but before he could fall, you were already by his side, grabbing onto him. He winced, his breathing ragged. But even though the pain, his voice came out taunting. You really shot me. He coughed, his smirk weak but defiant. That's how scared you are, huh? His uncle's face was stone, unreadable, but his grip on the gun tightened. Move, he ordered, his voice was sharp. This isn't your fight. It is. You have tried hurting my wife. Try me. Suddenly, Jungkook's men surrounded them from everywhere. His uncle knew they couldn't take a risk to make Jungkook his enemy. He knew what he's capable of, but he won't let this slide easily. This isn't over. You have made an enemy of your own blood. Jungkook smirked. I was never yours to control. His uncle's gaze flickered to you, a promise of revenge. Then he turned and walked away, leaving destruction in his wake. Meanwhile, your hands pressed against Jungkook's wound, trying to stop the bleeding. No, you whispered, your vision blurring with tears. Jungkook, stay with me. His hand covered yours, his grip was weak, but it was there. His eyes, despite the pain, still found yours. You're crying for me, Angel. He tried to smirk, but it turned into a wince. Didn't know you cared. Shut up, you choked out, pressing harder against his wound. Just shut up and stay alive. He looked at his man. Call a doctor. Jungkook, despite so much pain, chuckled softly. Did you forget that you are a doctor, Angel? I know you'll never let anything happen to me. You looked at him. You weren't a hostage. You weren't a trapped wife. You were a doctor and Jungkook was your patient. Your husband, the man who had taken a bullet for you. The room was silent except for the sound of your own shaky breathing. Your hands were still trembling, stained with his blood as you finished the last stitch. The bullet was out, the bleeding had slowed, but the damage was done, both to his body and to something far deeper between you. Jungkook lay back against the bed, his breaths uneven, but his eyes never left you. You could feel it, that intensity, the same one that always made it impossible to look away, but tonight, it felt different. You pressed a gauze against his wound, blinking away the stinging heat behind your eyes. You are insane, you whispered, voice barely holding together. Jungkook smirked weakly, watching you. You are welcome. Your breath caught, something inside you snapped. I didn't ask you to take that bullet for me. I didn't ask for any of this, Jungkook. You married me without my consent. You made me a prisoner in your world, and now you're getting yourself killed because of me. I can take thousands of such bullets for you. You stared at him, your chest rising and falling as you tried to make sense of what was happening, of what you felt living with him. You started seeing a side of him that you never thought existed. The way he was so patient when you tried to make every possible attempt to provoke him. He remained calm. Your fingers curled into your lap. I wish I could have met you differently. Jungkook's gaze did not waver. His face was unreadable, but you saw it, the brief flicker of something behind his dark eyes, something that made your heart ache. I wish we weren't forced into this. You swallowed hard, shaking your head. I wish we hadn't ended up in a situation that made me hate you. A shadow crossed his face, but he said nothing. Then, after a moment, his voice came, low and rough. Do you still hate me? The question struck you harder than you expected. Your lips parted, but no words came because you didn't know Jungkook had taken everything from you. Your choices, your freedom, your entire life, and yet, when that bullet came flying, he took it for you. When his uncle ordered your death, he stood in front of you, shielding you with his own body. How could you hate a man who risked everything for you? How could you love a man who took your choices away? You closed your eyes briefly, inhaling deeply before meeting his gaze again. I don't know. Jungkook exhaled sharply. You bit your lip, glancing away, trying to steady the storm inside you. But I do know one thing. Jungkook remained silent, waiting. You lifted your chin, determination flashing through your eyes. I'm not leaving you. His breath caught, your voice wavered, but you pushed through. I still won't live on your terms, Jungkook. I still won't let myself be a prisoner. I'll fight. I'll try to run if I ever feel trapped, but not to escape you. His brows furrowed slightly. Then why? Your next words came softly, almost fragile, so that you come after me. Jungkook's eyes darkened, his fingers twitching slightly where they rested against the sheets. And then his voice was hoarse, raw. You took a deep breath, and then we ran together. Jungkook's expression shifted, something heavy settled in his gaze, something unspoken. For the first time you saw it, the longing, the hope, the fear. You continued, your voice almost breaking. We leave this world behind, Jungkook. We live somewhere peacefully, somewhere we don't have to fight for survival, somewhere we can breathe. You held his gaze, but I won't leave you. I don't want to. A muscle in his jaw tensed, his fingers clenched around the sheets. Before releasing, no one ever gave him such a comforting hope. He wanted to hug you right away, but he couldn't. Finally, he spoke. If chasing you will keep you near me, he exhaled shakily, then I will follow you wherever you go. Your breath hissed, Jungkook's dark eyes softened just enough to make your chest tighten painfully, even if it takes a lifetime. Tears burned the back of your eyes, but you refused to let them fall. Jungkook. He shook his head, his voice raw with an emotion you couldn't place. Run as far as you want, Angel. His lips curved into a sad, almost bitter smile. Just know I'll always be right behind you. A sharp inhale left your lips, your throat closing because you knew he meant it. This man, who was once your captor, who had stolen your choices, who had thrown you into a world of chaos, was now the only one willing to set you free. Your fingers trembled as they curled into the fabric of your dress. And if I stop running? Jungkook's breath hissed. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly before he whispered, Then I will stop too. Your heart clenched. This was it, the moment you both realized this wasn't just a war between you anymore. It wasn't about who won or who surrendered, it was about what came next. Slowly, hesitantly, you reached forward for the first time, not as his prisoner, not as his captive wife, but as someone who was finally beginning to understand him. Fingers grazed his, Jungkook still, his breath catching. You looked at him, your voice barely above a whisper. Then don't let me go. A sharp exhale left his lips, and this time he didn't hesitate. Jungkook's fingers closed over yours, holding you there, firm, unwavering. And in that moment, with his blood stained the sheets, with his family turning against him, with an uncertain future ahead, you knew you weren't running anymore, and neither was he.